Hi, I'm Mark Jobe, Senior Pastor of New Life Community Church. Well, by now you've been exposed to what we call New Life Community Church. This dynamic, multi-site, 27 locations, multi-ethnic, multicultural church that ministers to thousands of people around Chicagoland and now is planted overseas as well. But what you might not be familiar with is the story of how it all began. So I'm going to rewind right now and go quite a few years back. And like everything, it's like a river, a lot of little streams that flow into making one story. And so I'm going to take a couple of those streams. In 1940, there was a businessman by the name of Philip Nystrom. He would drive in and out of Chicago, back to his home in the suburbs, and as he drove through Chicago, this businessman began to feel a burden for one neighborhood that he drove through called Back of the Yards neighborhood. And he wondered, I never see a church there. I don't see any gospel, Bible-believing church. Remember, this is in the 40s, before World War II is happening, and this neighborhood is emerging. He sees no church, and so he meets a young man in that neighborhood. And he starts talking to this young man, and he realizes this young man knows nothing about Jesus, and he has a burden. And so this man actually rents a storefront in 45th and Ashland with the purpose of helping children in that community hear about Jesus. He contacts Moody Bible Institute that's downtown Chicago, and he says, hey, can I have some volunteers to come and help with teach these children about Jesus? And so in 1940s, because of the burden of one man, a small church setting, actually not a church yet, an outreach to children starts in Back of the Yards neighborhood and ministering to these children that have nothing to do with Jesus. Some of them barely speak English, but this little place emerges and they call it the Berean Bible Mission. Fast forward to another stream. A 17-year-old is coming from northern Spain. His parents are church planting missionaries. Grew up in a town of 200 people, more sheep and goats and cows than individuals. Lands in the city of Chicago at 17, hates the city. I'm talking about myself. Can't stand the city, can't wait to get out of this city, is studying downtown Chicago at Moody Bible Institute. People are talking about how they have a burden for Chicago, and I'm saying I can't wait to get out of Chicago. A year into it, 2 years into it, I have a dream. I wake up from this dream. Never happens to me, but I write out this dream as an 18, 19-year-old. The dream is a dream of me and my roommate, John Palmieri, going into this muddy city, and people are dirty and it's dark, and we walk in and there's almost no light, and we find a church in this village, and I knock at the door of this church and it's bright inside, and they open up the door and they see that we're clean and they invite us in quickly. They say, quickly, come in. We're trying to keep the dirty people out. Quickly, come in. And me and my roommate are saying, well, how are the dirty people ever going to get clean if we don't invite them in? They say, well, no, this is clean. We don't want dirty people in. And so the end of the dream, we're trying to get out of the church to go to the dirty people. I wake up as a 19-year-old feeling like, I don't know what this dream is all about, but I feel like it has significance. Fast forward. I graduate from Bible college, wanting to go to Spain. My wife's family had grown up in this little children's work in Back of the Yards neighborhood. And I want to help out somewhere in Chicago. And so I call her up and say, hey, I want to help somewhere in Chicago. Can you tell me a place that I can help out in? And she talks to someone and says, hey, that little church is without a pastor. And so as a 21-year-old, I go and I help out this little church without a pastor. And I'm there. It's a small group. They have 18 people or so. They haven't had a pastor for 2 years. I walk away thinking, wow, that church really needs some help. And they ask this question to me. They say, hey, would you be willing to come and be our pastor? Remember, I can't stand the city, and I have no experience, and the salary that they offer me is $8,000. And so I pray about it and I say, okay, maybe this is God. And so I say, yes, I will come and help you out for 3 years, but then I'm leaving Chicago. I'm going to Spain. And so at the age of 21, I started at this little church in back of the yards neighborhood. We had no worship team. Our building was falling apart. My salary was $8,000 a year. The total church income was $17,000. There were drug dealers on the corner. This looked like the church that should shut down. What I found out is that there was 2 ladies that had been praying on Wednesday night prayer meeting. And they had been praying before I got there, Lord, don't let this church shut down. We haven't had a pastor. People are leaving. We're going to close. Don't let this church shut down. And God brought together a couple of people, and I'll never forget it, 5 of us in a nursery, knelt down, and we said, God, you haven't closed the doors of this church yet. The neighborhood is full of gangs. People are leaving, but we believe that you have a purpose and a plan. So would you pour out your Spirit in such a way that many people throughout this city are touched? We prayed an audacious prayer. Let me tell you, I love the fact that God takes the poor, the broken, the unwise. He takes the foolish of the world and He says, aha, now I can show my power. And that's exactly what God did. In 1986, a church was birthed, so to speak. We already had the building there, but it came to life with a new vision, and we called it New Life Community Church. In the early days, we just started sharing the gospel with anybody that would listen. We had no staff, we had no big program, but we believed that God wanted to do something. And we started seeing people come to Christ, people that normal churches would reject. Hey, the muddy people. We started seeing people that never came to church, people from the projects and gangbangers. I mean, this was a dangerous crowd. Our ushers, you didn't want to mess with our ushers, let me tell you, because most of them had a prison rap. And I remember one time a guy messed with our ushers and 2 of them picked him up and took him outside. And one of them had led a gang and the other one was an ex-drug dealer. So do not mess with our ushers. And God started raising out of this small group of people that were radically saved. They started coming to Christ. The majority of the church, as it grew, was unchurched, non-Bible background, but we saw conversion after conversion after conversion happen, and that little church started to grow in that little neighborhood as God started to work in redeeming lives in some powerful, unusual ways. As the church kept growing, in 1995, about 9 years after, we decided to fast and pray for the city. By this time, the church had grown to almost 700 people. Most of them were new believers. We were one church meeting in one location. We started meeting from back of the yards. We started renting a facility in IIT at 33rd and Federal. And as we gathered together, God put on our heart, we need to fast and pray for our city because violence was at an all-time high. Almost 800 homicides had happened at that time. The city was in a very difficult place, and we felt, God, do something, do something. So we fasted and prayed for 40 days that God would move and work in our city. We had never fasted before, so this was challenging. One lady told us that she woke up in the middle of the night chewing on her pillow, dreaming about hamburgers. But at the end of that time of fasting and prayer, the Lord put on our hearts a vision to see a large number of people in the city come to Christ. We started to pray that God would give us 1% of the city of Chicago. When we did the math, we realized that's 30,000 people. And so we started to dream, what would a church like that look like? And as we wrote out a paragraph of what that would look like, we realized it would have to be in multiple locations. It would have to be strong at proclaiming the gospel. It would include the poor and the homeless and the CEOs and the rich. It would be black and white and Hispanic and Asian. It would have to be dynamic. It would have to be fueled by prayer. It would have to be I'm going to say it, a movement church. It was in 1995 that New Life went from one location to a vision from the city. And we took the daring adventure to say, what would a church that multiplies through the city and make disciples look like? Fast forward 35 years later, and you will find that New Life now is a multi-site, multi-ethnic, diverse church meeting in 27 locations around the city of Chicago, 43 worship services, 3 languages, English, Spanish, and Mandarin. Most of the people that come to the church have come to know the Lord through the church's testimony. We reach in neighborhoods that are up and coming, young professional neighborhoods where housing is very expensive, and we meet in immigrant neighborhoods where people don't speak English. There's black and white and Hispanic. The team is diverse. The church baptizes and reaches people every year. The last couple of years, 3 years, we probably baptized over 1,000 people. This is a disciple-making church that has a vision to spread throughout our city, changing the dynamics of our city, the culture and the spiritual atmosphere for the glory of King Jesus. It's quite an adventure to see this church expanding. We started New Life Centers that now is feeding literally thousands of people and mentoring people. We started New Life Cities that is planting churches overseas. We have 7, 8 churches overseas in some Spanish places as well. So God is actually, from that little beginning at 44th and Paulina, touched literally thousands and thousands of people now through this ministry that we call New Life Community Church, because God takes the small and the little and the foolish and does amazing things. We're inviting you to be a part of our journey. We believe that God has brought you with a purpose and a plan to this church. We believe that no matter what your background, no matter where you've come from, if you have a heart to follow Jesus and an adventurous spirit to say, I want to join a church that's making a difference, then you've come to the right place. People from every background, high and low, south side, north side, right side, bad side of the tracks, find a place that they can call home here at New Life Community Church. Welcome to the family.